Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Southern Outdoorsman Podcast. I'm excited to do this one, man. We have been, like I said on Monday, we've been holding out on the listeners. All right. When did we first interview Daniel? Do you know?
January.
It was January. Okay, so it was kind of right there towards the end of deer season, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you had already discussed these like tactics with him back then.
Yep.
But we didn't want to discuss it in January because we wanted to kind of start off deer content this summer hot with that episode.
Yep.
So before we did, his backstory, kind of how he grew up hunting, which ended up being a really good episode too. Really entertaining episode and one that I think a lot of people can relate with as far as, hunting with your dad, hunting with your grandfather, that southern
Deer camp
atmosphere. Really fun episode. But man, I've been kind of excited about doing this one pretty much the entire time that we've been waiting to do it. And I was just excited to get it out to the listeners. I was like, dude, maybe we should just go ahead and record it. But no, we waited till after turkey season or right there at the end of turkey season to record it and got it out. And dude, what were your thoughts on it? I mean,
man, I hope first I liked it from the aspect of trying to be as efficient as possible, knowing when and where to hunt at specific times of the year based off what you've got information on from past years' experiences, both trail camera use, but also visual observations. And what I'm hoping for is to see an increase of listener success stories from this specific topic from people that's already been running trail cameras and kept track of everything and kind of built out their own calendar going to this season. So that's what I'm really hoping for and seeing how it works out for some people. I know we're going to do it specifically on one piece of public land that we've got some history with.
Yep.
So I'm interested to see how it works for us, but also I'm very interested in seeing how it works for some of you guys, both the viewers and the listeners, and seeing how some of you guys apply this specific strategy into your own, piece of public or hunting club, lease, wherever you're hunting right now. So what about you?
Yeah, one of my favorite things about it is pretty much anybody can go back and use this, especially if you have a couple years of history with an area. You probably have something to go off of.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you don't have a bunch of bucks working a community scrape on camera multiple years in a row, but you have your own observations. You might have some trail camera data. You might have the information like what Daniel was talking about. Maybe you're in a hunting club and you're like, man, over there on field 13, there's always a good one that gets killed. Like, for instance, last year on my hunting club, there's one spot on this power line where one of the two biggest bucks on the property got killed at, and I know the date he got killed. So I can take that and kind of use it. So I really like it from that aspect. And two, I also really liked it because we have multiple years of trail camera data in some areas, which I'm very excited about too. And also it works out. I like how Daniel explained it kind of came from a place of necessity because he doesn't have all the time in the world to go hunt necessarily. So you have to be very mindful about where you're going and when you're going there and kind of planning out your season. So I really like that. And kind of throwing it back a little bit to what we discussed on last Thursday's episode with the whole don't bounce around too much, don't overextend yourself. I feel like if this tactic really works out like he says it does, you could actually bounce around very effectively if you build history with 3-4 different areas and you know exactly when to be there. Then this is probably the best way to actually chase the rut, which we talk about all the time, being here in Alabama. Our earliest rut is in November. Our latest rut is in February. You can travel around and hunt those, but not just taking it as, okay, this is a good 2-week period to be in there. We're going to discuss this with one of our spots here in a minute. This isn't, this 2-week area is good to be in here, but what is like the 3 days you need to be in there specifically?
And what tree you need to be in for those 3 days.
Oh, that fires me up.
Yep. So, I mean, that's a big aspect of it. And then also, one thing that I like, especially when he talks about his calendar, is no matter when you have a day off, say you only can hunt 1 or 2 days a week, if you build out your calendar correctly and actually do like what he talks about with the date ranges of when you have activity in certain spots, you already have it listed out. So no matter at what point of the season, if you have a day off, you look at your calendar and you have a specific spot, like in up to even a specific tree you need to get in based off the conditions for that day, and it's already written down. It's like you're doing a lot of the homework ahead of time. You have to manually write everything out, but then you see exactly hey, I know I'm off, December the 15th, for the day, and you pull up the calendar, like, okay, I need to go sit the old Panther Pond or whatever.
Yeah, Panther Pond.
Yeah, or the Rock Garden or wherever the spot you name that spot, and you kind of already know what tree you need to get in, and that's the spot you go and hunt based off the information that you get from the previous year.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that fires me up, dude. That fires me up. And as a perfect example of this, okay, we have this one area. We've discussed it a lot on the podcast. There is 2 large community scrapes in this one general area, on this one ridge, that we have been running cameras on for 2 seasons now, throughout the rut, 2 seasons in a row. And we killed 2 bucks in there. We hunted a little bit last year, but not really a ton. Just schedules didn't really line up. Some plans fell through, so we didn't get to hunt it as much as we wanted to last year. But our cameras were still there, and this is a great example. And also, this also kind of plays into the whole thing. When you want to go chase the rut, I guarantee you go to Facebook or any Facebook group or any bow shop in person, and you stand there and you say, "Hey guys, I'm planning on hunting around so and so town or so and so county. When is the rut?" And there's like 5 guys there. You're probably going to get at least 3 different answers, if not 5, right? Because everyone argues about when the rut is. And what is actually happening there is they're all probably right as far as when they've seen rutting activity. This happens all the time on a place that I grew up hunting. The rut is like peak breeding is like around December 15th or so. You talk to some people, they'll say, "Oh no, the rut's Christmas." You talk to other people in the exact same area, they'll say, "No, the rut's more like right after Thanksgiving, Black Friday." You talk to other people, they'll say, "Oh, it's around December 10th." They're all right.
Or we had one guy that I think we've interviewed before who used to hunt it. It was, "Oh man, it's the second week of January."
Yes, exactly. And what that is they're all just hunting different doe groups, right? And there's probably some different. This doe group over here comes in on this day. This doe group over here has a doe that comes in on this day, and it kind of cycles throughout the year like that. And so what Daniel's trying to do is take all the guesswork out of it. And this also kind of reminds you of guys like Wes, who they talk about targeting your specific does, right? And like learning which does come into heat when, and don't shoot them. Wasn't it Wes that said he had one named like Old Susie or something like that?
Yeah.
Old Sarah, and he shot like 3 bucks off the back of her over the years. She had like a double throat patch or something that made her recognizable. But he knew within a day or 2 of when she came into heat, and he'd go in there when he knew she was coming into heat, and you're just like hitting it perfect.
Pop a buck.
Yeah. So all that to say, we've got 2 years of history with this area, and I feel like this is a good example. Okay, year 1 and year 2. Looking at pretty much the month of December, and there was daylight bucks coming through on these scrapes throughout the month. It's like, oh, here's a buck, just kind of randomly on different days. Year 1, we went in there and we killed on. I don't know if I should give the certain dates actually.
Absolutely not.
All right, so we went in there year 1 and we killed on the 15th and 16th, right? Mm-hmm. So we look at the trail camera data, and there was bucks kind of showing up randomly all throughout that month. And then year 2, which is this past season, we had our cameras in there again. We only hunted it, I think, twice. Did you ever hunt it?
This year, no.
I only went in there 2 times, I believe. Saw some deer, but like didn't see a buck worth shooting. I saw some young deer and some chasing and some does. This year and last year, the mature bucks showed up on those dates, those exact same dates. So last year on one of the scrapes, we had a mature buck on the 15th. We'll just call it the 15th. It's not really the 15th. We had one show up on the 15th. This year we had one show up on the 15th. That's 2 years in a row. Last year I killed a buck on the other scrape on the 16th. And we had another deer show up on that scrape, mature buck show up on that scrape on the 16th. So within 3 days, I think there were some other ones that showed up on either the 14th or the 17th. But basically within 3 days of that date, we killed 2 bucks, and I think there was 3 different mature bucks that showed up 2 years in a row. Not the same bucks. One of them might be the same buck. One of those, I was looking back at the pictures, one of those really, really wide bucks might have been the same deer, but I don't know 100%. But mature bucks, 2 years in a row, I mean, just exactly what Daniel was talking about. In those areas, on those community scrapes, to the day, a year later. And to me, it almost makes me feel a little bit better that it's different mature bucks, because it's not the same deer being habitual. It's like, no, mature bucks in general are using this area on these dates for some reason, and it must be because there's a doe in here.
Yep, absolutely. They know from living that area, and they could have come by last year. They just didn't get on camera. They could have just gone by the camera, and that's something that Daniel's talked about. Is a lot of times in that date range, he's not killing a deer directly in front of the camera. It might be 100 yards from the camera, but he can get a shot at it. And it's just like they're coming through that general area during a very specific window of time.
Yeah, because there were some other dates throughout December that they were showing up. So there'd be a mature buck in daylight. There's a lot of videos of them at nighttime throughout the whole month. Like very often they're in there at night. But there was a couple where they're in there in the daytime, and it was just like a one-off photo. So it's like on December 2nd. Boom, mature buck standing in the scrape. And then, you look on either side of that date. So you look at the 1st and the 3rd and the 4th and the 5th, and there's not another one on that scrape in those days. Go look at the following season. So that's 2022. Go look at 2023. There's not a mature buck on those cameras in that date range. So do I need 2 years of data, or just that 1 year where he just showed up? Is that enough? So that's kind of what Daniel was talking about. Like maybe he just didn't walk by the camera, whatever the case may be. But it makes me feel really, really good. So that we have them on those exact dates 2 years in a row. And that also kind of changes my perspective on the area a little bit too, because last year when the dates that I did hunt it, I didn't hunt it on the right dates. And activity was just kind of lacking last year. I did see a younger buck pushing a bunch of does around, which was kind of entertaining, or 2 young bucks pushing does around. So that was kind of fun to watch, but it kind of made me think about what Daniel was saying. Maybe I was in there a little bit too late. I was in there probably 2 days too late, because by the time that spike or that 4-point is harassing those does, that big buck has already come through there and checked him out, because he's been around for like 5 years. He knows his area and he knows his does, right?
Yeah, knows when he needs a time. And that's one thing I think Daniel talked about is a lot of times those mature bucks come through right before a lot of that sign really pops off real heavy. So it's like, by the time you're seeing a lot of that heavy sign, that mature buck might be already gone off to the next doe group. Like he's came in, checked those does, potentially even try to bred one of those does. And by the time the younger bucks kind of figure it out, those younger bucks are laying down a lot more of that sign, like, just the basketball size scrapes all over the place, rubs all over the place too. So it's like, if you're going off just, sign, if you find that really hot sign, by the time you find that hot sign, it may be too late. Like you might be in there and, he was there 4 or 5 days previously.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Which that's one thing I don't think we've really ever paid attention to is influx of sign around those day ranges, and like seeing if like in and around when those mature bucks show up, like before they show up, is the sign really changed a whole bunch versus after they come through and they kind of leave, or just at least not show up on camera? Does the sign kind of spike? Does it stay the same, or whatever? But that's one thing that he talked about. Like I think he was talking about him and his buddy Jeremy. Maybe it was last year, 2 years ago. One of them shot a buck, and then they went and hunted these spots that previously the year before they had bucks on camera during a certain date range. And there used to be, kind of later in the season, there'd be a ton of big rubs and scrapes all over the place. And when they were in there was like no sign. And overnight, literally, they were in there one day, 0 scrapes, very little rubs. Next day they go in there, it's like, looks like there was 100 bucks that ran through there, making scrapes everywhere and rubs everywhere. And it was like literally overnight, the sign changed.
Yeah, that's kind of how it was when me and Mike went in there, because I think Mike hunted that area twice with me last year. The only 2 times I went in there. And the second time, I think it was when we went in, there was scrapes. I mean, everywhere. It was kind of ridiculous. Like hundreds of scrapes, literally. They're just everywhere. So it kind of, I'll tell you what, I know what I'm doing for a certain 3 days in December this year. I know where I'm going to be for sure. And I haven't dove into it a ton yet, just because, we've been busy. But the other area where our cameras are at, that's not too far from there, I'm curious to look at when the bucks are really daylighting there, because it could be something where it's like, okay, this weekend I need to be over here. The following weekend I need to be over there. And again, just being very precise with where you're hunting and when you're hunting there. And of course, I think I'd be curious on following up with Daniel on this, but how like how strict he is with it. Like, I wish I had thought about this during the podcast. Are there conditions in the field that would make you say, okay, wait, no, I need to give this a couple more days, or is it like, okay, he's supposed to be here. Like my cameras, my observations tell me that this 3-day period is it. And if it doesn't happen, is there anything that you might see or any encounters you might have or sign you might see that would make you want to stay those extra couple days? Daniel, if you're watching this, comment on YouTube below and let me know what you think, actually. So Cedar Ridge Chronicles.
Yep. What do you think? No, that's a good point. Talking about like the other area that's in the same ballpark regions, a couple miles away, potentially lighting up at slightly different points and be able to kind of hop around from both of them. But also, I think one thing that he talked about was, I can't remember what part of the podcast, was paying attention to not only bucks coming through there, but are they on that circuit that he talked about? And are they always coming from one specific direction? And the bigger the community scrape I found that big shed next to, the one that you killed your buck off of when we went in there in 2022.
Yeah.
At least going back and looking at it, it seems like a lot of the bucks were coming up that drainage into the scrape. At least I felt like, just thinking about some of the images in my head, it seemed like more of those mature bucks were coming from that direction, kind of up that drainage into the scrape and then kind of working their way back around to the left. And one thing he talked about is not really necessarily sitting over the scrape, but finding if they're coming from that one direction, kind of cheating your way that way a little bit, wherever that trail is coming from, where you can still shoot the scrape, but you can see further down that trail system that they're working up on. And that's where that spot, to me, it makes more sense. Is almost cheating yourself a little bit over towards that ditch where, yeah, maybe that scrape's 75 yards to your left, but you're looking down and trying to climb up high and looking down into that ditch off those 2 points that drop into it, and be able to kind of see any movement coming up from that direction, getting a shot that direction, especially if there's a wind that's kind of paralleling that little ridge system.
Yeah.
Where, they're coming in with a wind advantage, but you're cheating yourself just over enough where they can't really smell you, but you can look down there where they're coming up at before they get to the scrape.
Yeah, that's a good point. And with that particular scrape, that's a really good idea, because I've always hunted actually the other side of it, where I can't really see into it. I'm watching the edge there's like some mountain laurel and stuff down there that they come up out of, and that's what my buck came out of. And several of the deer we got on camera come out of there, and I actually walked out that ridge point right there when I don't even remember exactly when that was, but I walked out that ridge point, and there's a bunch more scrapes on that ridge point, like scrapes that I would put a camera on, like really nice scrapes. And I'm wondering if you got more in that drainage or up on the edge of it. There's some more thick cover right there, so you'd be climbing in that kind of sapling thicket little area. And you could probably see into that bottom really well, but you'd also probably be able to see the point really well also. I think that would be legit. So I'm going to dive into it a lot deeper, and I'm going to see if I can find because I just kind of skimmed through it, and it was that particular 3-day range that seemed really good. I'm going to see if there's like maybe possibly another date range that kind of works with that too, because last year we had 2 bucks come through with each other. Two of the better deer we had on camera came through literally with one another in broad daylight at like 8 a.m. I remember getting the picture while I was sitting at work, and I was just like, crap. So I'm curious on what day that happened and what the cameras were doing on that same date within 2 or 3 days last year.
Yeah.
Because I haven't really looked at that yet, but that's very interesting. But what are you following the whole idea that maybe you could use this as a tool to bounce around and chase the rut more effectively?
I mean, if you have enough cameras out, of course.
Because we talked a little bit of smack about that last week, about how you can overextend yourself.
Yeah, with pike. I mean, it kind of goes back to, if you're going to do that, having cameras out in certain areas. So like, say Alabama, for example, you do this in a bunch of states. In the Southeast, they have like a diverse rut if you're going to jump around in public, but you really need that camera data, kind of like what Daniel talked about, in a couple different regions, a couple different areas of the state that you can use to bounce around with. But, one thing Daniel talked about was, and we never really clarified this, but he's like, you can chase the rut all season in one place. And when he says the rut, I don't know if he means like truly bucks are breeding does all season, which I don't think's necessarily the case, but I think you can find maybe some does that come into heat a little bit earlier, maybe 2-3 weeks in advance of other does. Same thing on the back end, come into heat, 2-3 weeks afterwards. So you might have like a 6-week window where you can find like individual small pockets of does that are actually coming to heat. But I think also like him talking about like rutting activity, like a buck's just like checking scrapes at different points of the season, like be able to like find timings of when does are going to be, or bucks are checking scrapes. Kind of literally, I just thought about this, like what Drew Atkinson talked about in Arkansas, where he's killing bucks on scrapes early in September when Arkansas opens up, and also in January. And he's using doe estrus in both applications, where he's going out, he's either making a mock scrape or find big scrape, putting doe estrus out within 4 or 5 days of him hunting it, checking the camera, checking the cards, bucks showing up, putting more doe estrus out in it. Again, months before the rut starts, like in September. And the rut there's not until like mid-November. And he's killing bucks coming and check those scrapes early.
Yeah.
Like they've been out of it for 3 weeks or 2 weeks, and they're already, hitting these scrapes really hard. And he's killing bucks that way. He killed a buck like that this year. And then he killed... I can't remember if he killed the other buck late season or if it was just after the rut in and around some scrapes. But anyway, so he's kind of doing something similar to what Daniel's doing, but I don't know if he's doing it as specific as like the specific locations.
Yeah. God, that just got my wheels turning on a scrape I found on the club.
By the way, I'll tell you one scrape on the club that you need to pay attention to with what Daniel talked about is that one that's on that little SMZ that had the 1 to 10 points. I don't know if it was the big 10 point on camera.
Oh.
The one that I think Sam hunted, Mike hunted, I think you hunted once.
So that buck was we got both of them on it, but one of them was the buck that Trevor killed.
But what I'm saying is there was a specific date range when bucks were showing up during daylight on that specific scrape. And I'm saying for this year, because of whatever the situation is, there was a little window of time when bucks started showing up. Y'all need to be in there during that window of time. Actually,
that big buck, the first one that showed up on that scrape, he showed up while me and Mike were hunting the other area. Mm-hmm. We were sitting there, and I got that picture. And I was like, God. Cell cameras are kind of depressing.
They can be.
They can be a little bit depressing, not going to lie.
Oh, well, what else you got? I got something else. It's going to be a segue into a different conversation about deer hunting. But, what's some of your other takes about the episode and application for use and this overall thought process?
I want to hear from people on their opinions on it and how they're implementing it. I'm excited to implement it. I mean, I've got at least 3 different properties that I can already use this on because I've already got either the observations or trail cam data to look at.
You know who else did this, by the way? It worked for him, and he killed a hammer. JT.
Oh, yes.
Because he had a camera out on a piece of public in a very specific spot, highly overlooked. I've been in that area before, but he had it in a pine thicket that like nobody's going to hunt because you can't put a tree stand there. You got to sit on the ground. If you get in a saddle, you get like 5 feet up in a tree.
Yep.
But the deer just like naturally just kind of like travel through it. And he kept having these big bucks. I mean, he had some gigantic deer on camera.
Yeah, he had some very nice deer.
And he had this, he's like, man, during this week, I always have bucks on camera in this spot, so I'm going to go in there and hunt it. And I talked to him about it. And, we talked about like him getting around this little SMZ where these deer were kind of cutting around. He goes in there right after rain, 6:30 in the morning, 6:45 on a Sunday.
Yep.
And he's sitting there trying to figure out if he's going to get in a tree or not. And all of a sudden, that freaking buck that he shot wide 9-point, I think it was a 9-point, came, out of one section of the pines, came through the SMZ, popped up next to him. He shot him.
Dude, I forgot about that. And hey, shout out to JT. By the way, JT's selling land with National Land Realty up in the Huntsville area right now. So if you're up there looking for land, hit him up, man. JT Watkins. The first time me and JT scouted that area, dude, it had to have been like 2017 or 2018, and we were in the SMZ below that, the one that parallels the road, and he put a camera out. We got some does on it or something. And JT, over the years, basically from where we put that camera years ago, moved a couple hundred yards I mean, not far at all, up into a saddle up in the pines. And that's where he ended up getting all the bucks on camera and eventually killing that one. Mm-hmm. So that's actually a really good example of, again, kind of tying it back with last week, of learning an area really well. Meanwhile, I've been all up and down that place. I mean, miles and miles and miles. And JT has too, but he's always stuck to that one little area, and it paid off. Like, he killed a hammer last year.
Yep. But JT, if you're listening or watching right now, you better go back through all them years of trail camera data in that spot and build you that calendar out. When these bucks for daylight. And because now he moved to a little bit different part of the state and kind of everything.
Yep.
He's got that date range. JT, you need to figure out what days you need to make sure you're not showing land to clients, and you need to be there.
Hop in the truck, head that way, buddy. Yeah, he killed it in the rain too, right?
Yeah, or just afterwards, yeah. Because I went out there before church to try to help him get it out, and I wasn't all that helpful. I mean, by the time I got there, they already had it up on the road or back on the road coming out with it, and
perfect timing on your part.
But it was awesome. I was like, heck yeah, son. But anyway, so I mean, he's an example of doing it. I mean, really, if you think about, like, a lot of these guys that hunt private land, it's hunted private land for so long. Like, we had some listeners like this at the EcoWild Expo. They were like, man, I've hunted, like, one of the guys, can't remember his name. Crap. Hunted a property with him and his dad and his brother, like 1,700 acres. And he's like, I've been hunting for so long, like, we kind of know when and where to hunt certain spots.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think a lot of people, when you hunt private land, or if you've hunted public land for, decades, you kind of just naturally know, like, there's a window of time of when I should be hunting certain spots. And this comes because of, like, just experience. Like, I've had good hunts around these date ranges, but it's never, like, I think, to the detailedness that Daniel's doing it, where, like, you can almost do it quicker than having to spend 10 years in the area.
Yep.
Just by, like, trusting the information you're getting from cameras and having the woodsmanship of knowing where you're putting cameras at and why you're putting cameras there, but then taking that information and actually writing down the date ranges so you know exactly when and where to hunt different locations. But it's like, I think more people do this without thinking of it in the detail that Daniel's already doing it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because that goes to show where I was discussing earlier where we killed our 2 bucks. I was very much in that mindset. I'm like, okay, just like basically the month of December, I need to be in here, and it's good whenever. But Daniel's talking about just condensing that and being, like, very precise about when you need to be there. And so it's just neat to be able to go back and look through the trail camera data as well as our own personal observations and confirm exactly what he's talking about. It's like, I'll be danged, 2 years in a row, the same dates, they're in there. And I've always been, like, very interested in annual patterns, and that just kind of takes it to a whole new level for me. So, like, dude, I cannot wait to really put this into. We're gonna get a lot of listener success stories from this. I'm calling it right now.
Would we be dumb for not going back to Arkansas and going off some annual patterns when we had some of the bigger deer show up?
Probably. Actually, with all that trail camera data, because that's one thing that we thought about actually when we were in Arkansas. We're like, dang, we should have been here last week.
Should have had a bow in our hand.
Yeah.
Or actually, no, that was during the muzzleloader hunt.
Should have went up there with the muzzleloader.
We need to go back and actually reanalyze that. I'm serious.
I think I have all those pictures still.
Well, I know,
on
but
my
like
computer.
we need to look at when, like, the real big, like that 140-inch 10-point we came through in the drop tine deer.
Yeah.
And look at how close to the dates those deer were daylighting. Because, like, for real, it might be worth a little 3-day trip if it's, like, pretty close to each other.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about, is how can we be precise and make some of these things happen. So, especially if we don't have anything else, like, going on at those dates where I don't even remember what dates it was. It was like end of October, right?
Yeah.
So it's like if at the end of October we don't have anything else going on as far as, like, hunts or work or anything, hit the road.
Hit the road, Jack.
Hit the road, Jack.
Yeah, I just thought about that. It kind of goes back to, like, the whole when I had that real crazy big 8-point in Arkansas the year previously, 2 years ago, 2022.
Yeah.
2022. And we were talking about, like, oh man, I need to go back up there and hunt that 2-day window when he showed up on camera. And we never put another camera on that spot. So I don't know if that deer died, got killed, or if he's still back in there, but there was a hot doe in the area because I had another buck chasing that doe through, and that's when he showed up for 2 days on camera during daylight.
Man, I forgot about that.
And then
he
he disappeared just a gigantic frame 8-point.
God, that was a big deer.
And it's
that was like one of the most impressive deer I think we've ever gotten on camera.
Yeah, and it's like we never did it.
But even if he's dead, even if he got killed or whatever,
the date range still.
The date range is still there. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And now you've seen how big he is. Now you know that area is capable of producing a deer like that or bigger.
And if that and the 3-year-old 10-point that was chasing her, which was already a really good deer, I mean, he was probably in the 120s. If he made it and didn't die, and he knows that that doe hasn't got killed,
5.5 now, bro. That's what I'm saying.
Taxidermy bill.
So yeah, that's exactly why I'm so excited about this, and why I think we're going to get a lot of listener success stories from it. Because like right there, just like off the top of our heads, we have a couple. If we sat down and like really hashed this out, not on the podcast, and we're like naming places, think about how many instances we could find of this.
I don't know.
Look, JT saw a 130-inch 9-point up where you hunted with Chris and everybody last year.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Well, that was early season. That's a little bit different, but yeah, that was feeding. I think feed's different than like the pre-rut activity though. But yeah, you're true. I'll tell you another spot comes to mind.
Oh my gosh.
Where we hunted in Tennessee when you came up and had that buck chase that doe right by you. And I went in there and seen 2 giants 2 years in a row within not same date ranges. One was in November, one was in October, but like the same within like 300-yard section.
Yep. The old fence row parcel. Oh man. See, I'm saying, dude, like that's what I'm saying.
Because we never had we never put cameras out in there.
And again, the other thing I'm really excited about too is this also gives you a little bit of a framework where you can approach new areas. So I have at least 2 new areas this year that I'm interested in like kind of building on, and both of them are not areas that I'm going to hunt a ton per se. I mean, I don't know. I might end up hunting them a little bit more than I thought, but I'm probably not going to hunt them just all the time. It's not going to be like every weekend. But if I can go throw some cameras up there and invest some trail camera time and then go get a couple sits in and see what I have, go up there and find some community scrapes, go find some really nice trails going through some pinch points, go find some big historical rubs, which is what we talked about at EcoWild with Travis Lee and Jeff Baggett, which I don't think that one's come out yet. But the historical rub is another really big one that I'm going to consider now. And just go up there knowing that this is an area I want to hunt for, X number of reasons. Put that trail camera time in. You're not burning a ton of your vacation time to go hunt it and learn it or whatever. That might be a really effective tactic. So it's something I'm going to be trying to do over these next couple years with at least 2 different areas. So I'm very excited about that. But I like that it just gives you a framework where you can apply that and have a plan going into it.
All right. Side note. Did you get anything else on Daniel's episode?
No, go for it.
Okay. So we met a guy. Now he's a new listener of the podcast. Hunter Bourne from Hit 'em Right Coffee at the Eco Wild Expo.
Yep.
By the way, does make some really good coffee, first off. We were talking about Kansas. And he's hunted some of the same units that we're trying to draw, which, by the way...
By the time this comes out, I think draw results will be active.
And guess what? I found draw results for those units from last year.
Uh-huh.
I'm not going to say it's impossible for us not to draw.
Oh, God. But, you better knock on some wood,
but
son.
it's... I'm 100% going to draw because of my points.
Okay.
If you don't draw, I would be extremely.
If I don't draw, I'm going to be severely upset.
I think there was only 20 people last year that put in for that unit that and it like 1,800 tags on. Only 20 people had the amount of tags or points that you had last year, and they all drew.
Oh, well, okay.
So yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like you should be good. There was only 3 people that had as many points as me that put in for that unit.
They're just burning points.
There was one person, dude. I saw one unit. I was just going through the draws. Clay sent it to me. Someone had burned 14 points. 14 in Kansas.
Bro. Time to cash it. I wonder if they killed something.
If
that was you, reach out. I want to know if you got
14 years they had been putting in, or like not putting. They haven't been putting in because they would have drawn beforehand, but they were just buying points for 14 years before they decided, oh, this is the year I'm going to go.
Hey, dude. And that is what you should be doing at home, listeners. You should be, if you're not going to Kansas this year, maybe you just started a new job and you're probably not gonna be able to go for a year or two. Maybe you got young kids.
Oh, it's already closed by this time.
Well, I'm just saying though, with like all these different states, whatever the case may be, if it's just not in the cards for you for the next 2 or 3 years, you should still go ahead and buy those points, whether it be Kansas deer points, Wyoming points for deer, antelope, elk, Colorado, which is closed already, but I would, dude, it's an investment in your future for real. You're going to thank yourself.
Yeah, I finally had to get you to buy an Iowa point.
Yeah, I bought an Iowa point this year.
Should have started last year when I told you.
Yeah, should have for sure. Well, same thing with Wyoming. How many Wyoming points do you have now?
I'll have 8 or 9 elk after because I'm buying a point again this year.
Yeah. So
and then deer, I'll have 7 or something. I don't know. It's a lot.
So like,
I mean, relatively.
But perfect example though. Like these last couple of years, like we've had other stuff going on, and like Wyoming wasn't on the radar for you necessarily. So, are you trying to calculate how many points you have? I mean, I think once you get around 10 points for Wyoming, you probably get like some of the best, right?
Have you heard about Point Creek?
Well,
I had a better chance of drawing some of those units 4 years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
So the back when the first time we hunted Wyoming in 2017, we went to an area and we saw hundreds of elk. Man, we saw some like really, really big bulls.
That unit specifically probably take you 13 right now to draw. By the time you get to 13, it'd be probably at 16.
Well, back then it was a 10-point unit.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying.
And so now it's 13?
Yeah.
Well, you're catching up. You know.
And it keeps going. That's the thing.
You'll get there eventually.
No, it keeps going. You don't understand point creep. It keeps going up.
Are they preference point or?
It's all.
I mean, I understand point creep.
Yeah, it's all preference points.
Okay.
So
well, yeah, that's a problem.
The best thing you can hope for is a winter kill off, kind of like how we drew it for elk or for mule deer.
Yeah.
And then nobody wants to put in for it, and then you just risk it, hoping you can find one.
And we did.
Oh, we did. Yeah, we did. But I'm saying like that's like your. It sounds terrible. But that's like your best opportunity to draw one of those hard units is they have like a bad winter kill off. And, you know, they're going to cut tags down, but a lot of people aren't going to burn their points if they have a bad winter kill off. Mm-hmm. So it's like maybe you could draw the next year. And if you do, hopefully you can find some animals. Just depends.
Yeah. Well, in states, so the difference between a bonus point and a preference point system is a preference point is like if you have the most points, you just get it. So you get preference based on your amount of points. A bonus point system means it's like kind of like a raffle. So you
Lottery.
Yeah, so if you've got like 15 points, your name goes in the hat 15 times. But me, with 1 point, I can still draw that tag. In a preference point system, if it's like a 15-point unit, I'm not getting that tag. Like, there's no way I'm getting that tag. So, actually, Alabama's SOA system is a bonus point system, I believe.
Yeah, we're going to clarify.
They call it preference point.
We're going to clarify it, though, on a future episode.
Yeah, which is very confusing. Because at least out west, that's how they make the distinction. It's bonus points, preference points. Alabama is truly like a bonus point.
Yeah,
system.
they need to change the lingo for it.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But
we're going to clarify.
Going back to Kansas, okay?
Kansas. Yeah,
so we met Hunter, and we were talking, and you know he's hunted out in Kansas quite a bit in the past, and he was showing us the last time he hunted was a couple years ago. Like it was last year, they could have trail cameras out in place, and he showed you the photo, right?
Oh, yeah.
He showed us the photo of this buck he was chasing in one of the units that we're hopefully going to draw. And when I couldn't comprehend how big that deer was. I mean, it is gigantic. I mean, the number
like record book.
Up 210, 215, maybe 220. I mean, a deer that people would go to a high fence and try to shoot. Just
actually.
Gigantic, typical with a gigantic drop tine coming off one side. I mean, just a huge deer.
Yep.
He said he had him at 50 yards, and it was walking away. He tried to grunt at it, and he came up with a doe, and the doe was underneath the stand. And when he went to grunt, the doe saw him and was looking right up at him and blew. And then she ran off, and he went chasing after her, and that was the last time he saw that buck.
That's a bummer.
Yeah, I was like,
was that on private?
Public.
That was on public?
He showed me the spot, and I'll tell you, like, I don't know if I would have ever hunted that spot because the way it looked.
Really?
Yeah, small little parcel, little tiny little creek drainage coming off like a bigger like creek drainage, just like nothing that would like get my attention. But he said he walked all of it. He just found some huge sign and threw cameras out. Again, it was the last year they had before they outlawed trail cameras on public, and got him on camera. And he's like, oh, now I know what we're hunting. And he showed me another video. He had one buck come out. You know, our buddy that lives out there, he's like, you're going to see 150, 160-inch deer if you draw. He had a 150-inch 8-point, and he filmed it on his phone. And I'm like, big deer. And this other deer, that deer would fit inside this other buck's rack. Okay.
Yeah.
And he had it like at 70 yards in like a cut cornfield. He was sitting on that ground, like hunting the edge of it. And he's like, yeah, I was tempted to shoot it, but he's like, I also knew what else I had over here. And he's like, I wasn't overly. He's like, if it got close, I might would have done it. But he's like, I don't know if I want to shoot that deer when I have a deer. It's 50 to 65 inches bigger than that.
Yeah.
But it just deer's just walking out there, kind of chilling, kind of going through cruising for does. But anyways, I'm very excited about Kansas.
Me too. Especially the time of year that we're going to be going. I'm like, I can't wait. Because this is going to be the first, Midwest, like, peak rut hunt I've ever done.
Well, another thing he said was, did you talk to him about the timing that he likes to go?
No.
He doesn't like to go early. He doesn't like going during the rut. He likes to go late rut. Like, he likes to go, like, Thanksgiving time frame. And that's when he went. And he's like, when you go later like that, he's like, there's still hunting pressure, but a lot of it's kind of died out. But he's like, there's those big bucks are back on their feet. Like after they've been locked down with does for, breeding does for, a week and a half, middle of the rut, that later part of the rut, as it's kind of tailing back off, just like the beginning, those bucks are big bucks are back on their feet trying to find those last few hot does. He's like, it's just enhanced movement. And he's like, I was all over bucks late like that, like late part of November.
Yeah, I could see that. That's kind of the same thing that you get on in late October.
Yeah,
right?
the early side,
like right there around, because you'll talk to guys from time to time who hunt the Midwest who really like that week of Halloween or the Halloween specifically, where most people would consider, I guess, peak rut to be like November 10th, 12th, somewhere in there,
15th, 16th, yeah.
So you're just kind of hunting that very, very early part, which kind of tracks again with what Daniel's talking about, where those bigger bucks are going to be up on their feet and they're going to go and check their does before it gets crazy, before all those little deer, all the younger bucks kind of start acting a fool. Or really by that point, they're already kind of acting stupid.
Yeah.
But they're coming through and checking with a purpose, right?
Yeah.
So I could see that happening late too. My only concern with going late is that there's like literally less bucks because a bunch of them get killed. So that is a consideration, And I'm not going to act like all of them get killed because most of them don't. Mm-hmm. But there is to consider, if there's 25 bucks on this area and you go at the later part of the year and 10 of them got killed, that's 10 bucks you ain't hunting anymore.
They're signing you're seeing that deer's dead now.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So that is something to consider. That makes me a little nervous about it because we don't have any history with the areas that we're going to. We do have some buddies who will be able to give us some advice, but we can't run trail cameras. Mm-hmm. So that's another thing. So it's not like, because we were talking about this before, we're like, dude, let's go this summer and just freaking drive out there and drop a bunch of cameras, but nope, can't do that.
We weren't saying that. What are you talking about? I knew it was illegal.
No.
In the past we've
been talking about that.
Yeah.
So,
before they
but now we can't do that.
Yep.
So that's like when we get there, it's just going to be kind of boots on the ground, like run and gun, and figure out where they're at.
Another thing, I was asking him like what the woods look like because there's not a lot of woods. I mean, just not. And he's like, the woods are very open. And he showed me video, and it's literally like, it's like higher stem count stuff where the trees might be like 6 to 8 inches diameter. There's some bigger trees. But like you can see right through it, like 100. He's like, I could see 200 yards like in that bottom. And he's like, the deer just like bedding in CRP, they're bedding the edge of it. But he said they just like walk through that stuff. He's like, they walk the edges of it, they walk in the open, and they walk through like those open hardwoods. And he's like, it's weird because he lives over in North Carolina. And, he hunts some a little thicker stuff. And he's like, you go out there and you're like, it's just weird. Like you'll find sign there, and that's actually where you could kill the deer is like in that stuff.
Yeah, that's gonna be like kind of a weird.
Yeah, because we're like, well, let's go find the thick stuff, and he's like, you can kill them in thick stuff, or you just find the best pinch point where everything all bottlenecks down to a certain spot, and you sit right there.
Yep. Yeah, I'm very excited. I'm just excited to have the experience of that, again, Midwestern rut. Supposedly is going to be very intense compared to maybe what we're used to, or at least more visible than what we're used to, and then the pinch point stuff. That's one thing, again, from like the very start of this podcast, way back in 2018, what we've always talked about is the difference between us down here in the South and people who hunt Kansas, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, places like that. Is down here, cover is not a limiting factor. They can bed anywhere basically. up there it is. And like we've driven through, where were we going?
Indiana. Go to ATA.
Yeah, we were going through Indiana, and we were just laughing because we were driving through Indiana, and it's just like
huge fields.
Like 2 miles off the horizon, you can see a patch of trees, and it's like, well, that's where they have to be over there.
Yeah.
Like everything else is just dirt.
Especially like when they cut the crops out. It's like there's nowhere for them to hide except for that patch of woods.
Yeah,
right there.
yeah, exactly.
But also, it kind of goes back to like some of those hunting styles. Some of those guys where they're like they're so scared about bumping deer.
Yes,
and I could see that. Like if there's only like a 30-acre chunk of hardwoods and it's half a mile around it is just open ag field. It's all cut. If you blow those deer out of there, 1 or 2 times, you might not have any more bucks. Like they might just be like, I am out of here.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it's so limited of a cover type that, I'm just going to go over to the next best block and get out of here.
Yeah, I'm trying to I don't think I've ever even driven through Kansas before. I've driven through Nebraska couple times, but I don't think I've ever been in Kansas. But
it's cool.
One of the things that everyone always complains about having to drive through, like Nebraska and places like that are wide open, like on their way to go out west, they're like, "Oh, it sucks."
No, Nebraska does suck because it's that highway you go all the way over to Wyoming or South.
I love it.
It is so straight. I'm like, dude, it's like 8 hours, and like you literally could almost like duct tape your steering wheel straight, and like you'd be safe.
I kind of like it because it's so different. Like you're seeing the big cottonwoods and you're seeing, some like dunes and stuff, like just different habitat. I love driving through there. I hate driving through Illinois. God bless Illinois. Because if you're like going up to Wisconsin, you've got to drive through Illinois for like forever.
That's how Nebraska is.
Well, I know, but Illinois is nothing but like, crop fields,
and big bucks,
and little towns. You go out there and it's like plains. It's cool.
I mean, kind of
river bottoms and plains. It's just I like it because you start seeing freaking mule deer and stuff.
But when you get further west, the first 4 hours through Nebraska is miserable because it's just corn. Especially if you go before they cut it, it's just like you can't see anything. But the cool thing is you can go I think it's like 85 miles an hour on speed limit.
Yeah.
Through whatever that major highway is that cuts through Nebraska.
My too early prediction of Kansas, where, again, we're just assuming that we're going to draw like we did last year, and we all know how that turned out. But my too early prediction is that access is going to be like everything. And so I'm already kind of thinking my way through that about how to – because like you said, if your little timber blocks are like this big and that's where your deer are at,
Let me tell you, like the parcel that he – had that giant deer on, I don't think we would have ever looked at that parcel.
Really? Mm-hmm. Was there any timber on it?
There is, but it's like you look at it versus anything else, you're like, there's nothing special about it, like at all. Like there's nothing that was on that parcel that you can tell on the map that looked anything out like spectacular.
So how does that change your approach at all?
I think it's part of like you got to go out there. Like I think you got to have like some spots in mind that you want to go spot check, but I really think like the first day or two is drive and like go find sign and like just go walk as much as you can. I mean, I think you could just go in and just like find a couple parcels. Like I really like the way this lays out and so on. I mean, that one that he was on, there's like a bottleneck like with the creek system and everything, but it's like, it wasn't like a main creek section where you had all like, miles of this creek that all came to one spot. It was like a finger coming off the main creek that like dead end on this public. So it was just like the top side looked like a little hand kind of come out. And he's like, yeah, there's some CRP there, but all the CRP is like real low. It's not like big CRP that they're going to bed in.
Yeah.
And it's just nothing special. But for whatever reason, like this example, like that big buck wanted to be in that specific parcel.
So it's just you got to go burn that boot leather.
I mean, I think so.
Get out there.
I think there's a couple spots that you could probably find on a map, but the ones I think that are super obvious, like that is like the best rut funnel ever. You're going to go and there's going to be 3 ladder stands, some illegal trail cameras placed, and whoever else. I think, and that's kind of what he told me. He's like a lot of places because he asked a question on the live podcast about like how do you handle. Not really conflict on public land, but like when you go into a spot and it's like exactly what you're talking about. He used Kansas as an example. It's the best pinch point. You look out on the map, like everything all comes together in this one spot. You get there and there's trail cameras or there's ladder stands everywhere, all in that specific spot. because it's like so obvious to look at on a map.
Yeah.
And I was like, it kind of, depends. Like, are you
Better be the first one there?
are you seeing guys there? Does it look like it's getting pressured enough that the deer may not use it as they would if there wasn't that much human intrusion in that spot, and so on. But anyway, that's why he said he started bouncing some of these other like less obvious spots, and that's where he was finding some of that big sign. That's where he was getting on that big deer.
Yeah, I guess my fear with that would be that, if you go find a stand or whatever, especially like a ladder stand or something that someone has clearly drug in there and set up, they're planning on hunting it, they probably don't have a plan B, is if you shoot up a tree right there and old boy comes bebopping in right at gray light and he just climbs that sucker 20 yards from you, what are you going to do then? And that's happened to me before.
Yep.
So, like that would kind of suck.
Well, that's what he was talking about.
Imagine, dude, you drew this Kansas tag, you're out there, it's the best weather day of the whole trip, and that happens. Like, what are you doing then? That would be my only fear. Like, hopefully you got respect for
Hopefully
guys.
you can shoot farther than he can.
Yeah, hopefully you're set up a little bit better.
Yeah.
So, anyways, yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that turns out. I guess we won't go too deep into like our thoughts on Kansas. Let's wait till we actually draw, even though we've talked about it for like 15 minutes now.
You get, I don't know, 8 days. No, yeah. No, hold on. Yeah, 8 days till draw comes out. 8 to 10 days.
Mm-hmm. All right, you got anything else on that before we kick it over some Q&A?
Not really. I mean, kind of going back to Daniel's episode, I think if people really paid attention to like what Daniel talked about with the timing and paying attention to trail camera data, I think a lot more of all of us could have more success in specific spots and hunt with a lot more confidence too, where you're just not bounce around just to bounce around, but you actually, if you're bouncing around, you're going to very specific spots based off the information that you got from the year previously. So that's probably it. Nothing else. But anyways, as we kick it over to Q&A, so down the show notes of the podcast and also on YouTube as well in the show description, there is a link down below that talks about, you can click the link and you can leave us a question that we'll answer on these Thursday episodes. So we've had quite a few of these come in. Again, we're in deer content now, so feel free to write in any questions you have about deer content or really anything else you might want us to discuss on the podcast, especially when we get close to the football season. We can talk about how Auburn's not a football school or basketball school now. So we talked about that last night, by the way, with some of my neighbors. They're big Alabama fans, and I brought you up like, and my buddy Andrew, he says, Auburn's now a basketball school since they're not good at baseball, and they lost in the first round. Alabama made it to the Final Four, so it's a tough life. Anyways, we can talk about that in the Q&A if we want at some point.
I have a prediction that Alabama football is about to go into like 40 years of darkness now that Saban is gone.
It might.
So you just soak it up all you can.
I know it might. All good things come to an end.
Yeah, dude. Y'all be like lost out in the desert. All right. Anyways,
but anyway, so yeah, just leave us a question. We'll answer that on these episodes. So appreciate everybody's already submitted questions, and we'll kind of kick it over to I guess the first one. What we got?
All right. This is from Jack Stark from Georgia. He said, "Hey guys, I hunt bow-only areas in North Georgia, and I just finished my second season dedicated to public land. Last season was a steep learning curve, only seeing a handful of deer and killing one doe at the end of the season. This season, however, I have seen deer all but a couple of my 30-ish sits. The problem is they are always 60 to 100 yards away. I find good signs set up, see deer, but either they come from somewhere I wasn't expecting or they're on a parallel trail, etc. Then I readjust and set up closer where I saw them. Same thing, like a game of pinball bouncing around the area. Several of my hunts, I've even seen doe groups bed just off the top of a ridge opposite of me. The areas I've been hunting are hardwood ridges / draws loaded with producing oaks and good thermals and chunks of younger pines I believe they use as travel corridors. I've been avoiding creek bottoms because I can't find a good wind and they are too pressured. My question is, how do I close the gap when sign / movement seems so random in these big open woods? Funnels are hard to come by and food and trails are everywhere. I'm missing something. P.S. I'm a relatively new listener and I've certainly learned an exponential amount of woodsmanship skills that I can actually apply to my terrain. So thank you very much and good luck out there, Jack." All right. How would you tackle this? So big woods setting. He's seeing deer, but he's having trouble getting them within bow range.
So I'll, not from personal experience, but just what a very successful bow hunter on our podcast has talked about in this exact same situation. Bobby Worthington, the episode he did with me on kind of like his guidelines to becoming a better bow hunter. One thing he talks about, he hunts some similar kind of habitat, big hardwoods, open woods, is a couple things. He likes finding areas that historically, just like we talked about with Daniel, like there's bucks moving through a specific area. Now, if you're just trying to shoot any deer, I mean, you can still apply this, but he's looking for spots based off trail cameras where he's got bucks coming through using a very specific part of a ridge, okay? He'll find a tree that works good for access and also giving him shot opportunities. He does two things. Number one is he likes to put mock scrapes around his stand location. So he'll put one directly in front of his stand and maybe one or two off the edges of his stand, all within about 30 yards of him. And he uses it as a way to stop bucks that are coming through the area and make them, if they are 60 yards away because these mock scrapes have been out for a couple months and they've already been using them, gives them something to come to in that open woods to check, just as like a natural funnel. Like who did we interview from Oklahoma talked about that, like using scrapes as funnels? Gosh, what is his name?
Oh, if you hadn't asked me, dadgummit.
We had a guest on from Oklahoma. He talked about doing this in flatland, where it's like everything's monotonous, and he's like scrapes are actually funnels because like bucks working through an area or deer in general, they naturally will drift towards that scrape to kind of sit check it in open woods.
God, what?
But Bobby, it's okay.
That's gonna bother me.
But Bobby Worthington, he does that when he's bow hunting. Okay, so he likes putting mock scrapes specifically around stand location. Now, if you're always bouncing around, it's hard to do that. Like it's not like you're just kicking out a spot, putting some scent out, or even no scent, and then hoping it works. Like it's like having areas already in your mind of like, hey, like based off my information I've had and experiences the last couple of years, I know these few areas and these few spots have produced like deer, bucks coming through there. I'm getting visual observations, or I've seen on trail camera, and that's where he's doing this. So he's putting mock scrapes around these trees that he wants to bow hunt. The second thing he'll do is it's not legal to go cut down trees on public, okay? But typically you're going to find some kind of storm damage. You're going to find saplings and like trees different diameters on the ground, and dragging some of that cover and actually making a wall like across that ridge, or like a part of a funnel that deer have to come around the bottom side of it to come to where you're at. That's something else that Bobby talked about as well. And we've had other guests talk about that. Or just hunting, if you're in an area along the side of a ridge and there's a big down oak tree, sitting on whether it's the root ball side of the tree or the treetop, the canopy side of the tree, and using that as a funnel. So if deer are coming down the side of that ridge, they hit that tree, they got to either go up above it or they got to go down below it, whichever one's easier for them to cross it, and using that as a natural funnel. But I think if you did like the mock scrape aspect, along with maybe dragging some of that deadfall in and around some of those not pre-hung spots, but pre-thought out spots, that may help you out a little bit more, especially as you're getting towards the pre-rut into the rut.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing on the fallen tree thing. I have used that a couple times, and not necessarily big giant open woods, but let's say you're hunting a SMZ or just like a little wooded area between two grown up fields or two cutovers, and it's like a little bit too wide for a bow shot. Like you can't sit in the middle and shoot all the way to either edge, but somewhere in there maybe there's a fallen tree. I have done that before. Mark Turner's done that before. Like there's actually a YouTube video on field dressing a deer on our YouTube channel, and that deer that Mark killed, he's doing the video, is exactly that setup. It was a little timbered area where two SMZs kind of ran into each other, and it was too big to cover with a bow shot, and he was sitting right over the top of a big deadfall, and that doe just walked right around the front edge of it. So I would say that's probably the best thing to do. I don't really have much to add. You kind of nailed that one.
Yeah.
All right, this one is from Austin Reed from Alabama. He says, "Hey guys, I was re-listening to the episode Licking Branch Magic with Greg Skufka, and I have a theory. I noticed this year that I was finding a lot of rubs on anything different from the surrounding plants. For example, if there was one small tree or woody plant surrounded by several acres of just 10-foot tall pines, it would more than likely be rubbed. I can't think of any reason for this other than maybe it's some kind of visual cue that the deer can see from a distance when everything else is looking the same. If you look at some of the more heavily scraped areas under beech trees, the leaves on the last few feet of branches will usually be stripped off. This could serve as a visual cue since it's slightly different from the surrounding trees. I wonder if you could imitate this on certain trees just before the season and create the community or primary scrape where you want it to be, or if you could just look for that in the early season and pick out trees to key in on when you're going in somewhere blind. Also, side question, when placing cameras to watch the downwind side of scrapes, do you have a distance that you try to put it out, or do you just look for the closest thick cover / faint trail that a mature buck would likely travel? All right. So I've actually seen the same exact thing that you're talking about, Austin, and that might, for me, it's usually you're in a hardwood bottom and all the trees kind of look the same, and you see a cedar tree like way out there. I'm like, that cedar tree better be rubbed. And usually it is if you're in an area with a lot of deer. Mm-hmm. Actually, me and Tiffany were up walking around State Park in North Alabama this past fall, and we were just kind of hiking around. You can't hunt there or anything, but I've started
But God,
noticing.
if you could hunt it,
yeah,
needs to be an SOA.
Yeah, that place is ridiculous. I found one of the biggest scrapes I've ever found.
I talked to a ranger up there, by the way, because I was up there. Side note, it's like, can we shed hunt up here? He's like, absolutely not.
What?
He's like, you're not allowed to take anything off the property. Because I was like, I would love to go shed hunt that place.
I bet you could find. I bet it wouldn't be that hard to find.
No, not at all. Anyways, keep going. Sorry.
So that area, I noticed the same thing. It was all upland hardwoods, and the cedars were rubbed. Every cedar that we found was rubbed on that place. And I guess I've seen the same thing in pine thickets as well. But I have noticed that, and I've also really noticed it with beech trees. It's very, very common with beech trees. And you've talked about it before where we'll be walking through the woods and it's like, dude, I don't know. I'm like conditioned to look for scrapes under beech trees. Like if I see a beech limb hanging way off out through the woods, I'm walking to it. Cause like, I just feel like there's always a scrape underneath.
Well, it's like, that's why I always carry binos if I'm scouting or hunting with chest harness. If I see a beech tree limb and it just looks like it should be rubbed, if I'm 60 yards away, I throw my binos up and just look at it and see if I can tell. It's like, there's a couple of branches that kind of broke down that they've been working. But also talking about rubs, when I've been in areas where it's mostly hardwoods and you start getting into like small patches of like sparse pine saplings, that's where I find rubs. It's like, again, it might be what you're talking about. It's just something different in the area, and that's what those bucks are specifically targeting to rub. And you never know. I mean, you can find something like that. Because typically, if I get in an area with a bunch of hardwood saplings, I don't ever typically find a lot of rubs on the hardwood saplings. It's like the second you find a cedar or a pine, something a little bit softer, is like that's where the rubs are going to be at. But also, sometimes like they're never like big rubs when you find them like that. Some of the bigger rubs, it's like I'll find it on whatever that the main species of trees are in there. Like me and Michael Pike were turkey hunting a spot, a month ago, and we got into an area, this little creek bottom, and there was a bunch of big beech trees. I told Mike, I'm like, dude, there'll be a scrape down here. And I don't think we ever found a scrape, but we found a beech tree that was, you could have hung a climber this tree. I mean, it's probably 14 inches in diameter, and it was rubbed up, dude. And there was probably ended up being maybe 5 big beech trees. I said big, like big enough you could hang a climber on them, 12 to, 15, 16 inches diameter that were all rubbed up. Some, like one was fresh, the other couple were like older, within the last couple of years that were rubbed. But, it's just interesting. I mean, to me, there's, you see a big cedar tree shredded, that gets me excited. Like I've seen some giant cedars in Arkansas that were just, destroyed. But like you find like a big rub on a big beech tree, and you got tine marks coming up to like your chest. I'm like, that's a good deer. That's gonna be a really good deer.
Yeah, that'll fire you up right there. Man, we did so on the other part of the question, putting cameras like downwind of a scrape or just off of a scrape, because we've talked about a lot with multiple different guests on the podcast how these bucks actually usually swing around scrapes, and they're not usually walking to the scrape to check it, including the area that we were talking about earlier, using Daniel's tactics, these 2 scrapes that we've had cameras on for a couple years now. The first year I had the camera on that scrape, I actually had it at almost at ground level. The camera was like 6 inches off the ground, and it was like kind of looking up at the scrape. And the reason I did it like that is so you could see past the scrape, because it was kind of looking uphill. And so I was catching a lot of deer. Most of the bucks that we actually got on that camera were behind the scrape, 20, 30, 40 yards, and the camera was picking them up. And then the buck I actually killed off that scrape was like, I can't remember now, probably like 60 yards off the edge of it, kind of swinging around it. So that's really the only time that I've done that with success. But we interviewed somebody who that is like his whole thing.
Shane Parker.
No, it wasn't Shane. It was somebody else. I think it was someone maybe in North Alabama. Gosh, man, I'm trying to figure out when we interviewed this guy. I cannot remember now. Oh, gosh. His is mountains, and he would make mock scrapes, and he's killing deer.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I don't know his name, though.
I can't remember. Gosh. I thought we did it last January.
No, it was 2 years ago at least.
2022,
maybe? At least, yeah.
January 2022. But I haven't really done that with success. I don't know. Have you? I mean, you don't.
No, because I don't run a bunch of trail cameras. So, but like some of our guests, like the one that comes to mind, I know Shane Parker. He'll put a couple different cameras on a scrape. Some up to like 50, 60 yards downwind of a scrape, like on a faint trail. And he'll have success catching bucks, working some of those faint trails. Downwind, predominantly down. With the predominant wind, downwind of that scrape, and have success catching bucks on camera. My thing is,
got him.
Okay, what is
Dexter Gallagher, episode 319. It's called the 48-hour scrape. Episode 319. Go listen to it because he talks about it. I remember now. His whole tactic is he'll make a mock scrape and hunt it within 48 hours, and he's like killing that first wave of deer that are coming to like check it out, this new thing. And a lot of times he's killing them downwind of the scrape. Mm-hmm. And so we actually dive pretty deep into that right there. But I'm sorry, continue.
No. I mean, but it's just one of those things that I don't think we've done that enough to catch that movement. Because really, you got to have enough cameras. Like, you still would want a camera on the scrape. And then if you're going to put one downwind, like figure out like what's the best trail to do that with. I mean, I think it'd be fairly easy to pinpoint exactly what trail to put it on the, I say the bigger the community scrape, the one that's on the big sparkleberry, where you shot your buck, where they're coming up that ditch, putting a camera somewhere down that ditch or around that point that they're coming up on, and finding that trail to be able to put a camera on and see what bucks are slipping around there. But it's still one of those things that I think you could apply, but we haven't tried it a whole bunch, to be honest.
Yeah, I haven't tried it a lot yet. I want to. One problem with the scrape that you're talking about is there's not really a great defined trail near it. Now, I think some of the people that we've talked to in the past who do this kind of thing would say look for a more faint trail, especially if it's 40, 60 yards off that scrape.
You got rubs going down it.
And you got rubs going down it. That's where you want to put that camera. But the only way I've tried this so far is just putting the camera in a way where it's looking almost past the scrape. Like I'm still watching the scrape. Now the problem with that is if you're running it on video mode, they're going to see your camera every time. Whether or not that like boogers them up and they quit using the area, I don't really think it does. But I could be wrong. With some deer it might. With some other deer it might not.
Mm-hmm.
So we had several deer on that camera look, right at the camera, clearly noticed the camera, and then we don't get them on camera again for like 3 weeks. And I'm kind of skeptical that they quit using the area entirely. I think that it's more likely they're probably just swinging around the camera, so it like doesn't freak me out that much. But I don't really like having a big giant buck like look at my camera and like really study it and check it out. So, but anyways, that would be my suggestion on that. We got a couple other Q&As, but we're actually going to hold on to them for some future episodes because there'll be really good questions to ask some guests that we got, so we're going to hold on to them. So y'all write in some more Q&As for sure. We got some in the bank still left over from last year, but we need some new ones. So y'all go to the website. There's a Q&A submission form over there like Jacob mentioned earlier, and you can drop those in. We will get to them relatively quickly because we've worked through most of our back catalog. So appreciate everyone who's written them in already. You can also drop some questions on our YouTube comments. We'll try to capture those as well, read through some of those comments. Am I missing anything? Hunters Hangout. Talk about the Hunters Hangout.
So Hunters Hangout, by the time this episode has come out, we just did our second one this past Thursday. But every other Thursday, so next Thursday, again, not this Thursday when you're listening to this episode, but the following Thursday, we'll have our third Hunters Hangout on Patreon. So you can join Patreon. I guess we can start including that in the show notes of the podcast. All you got to do is just join Patreon. And for our paying members, we're doing these bi-weekly Hunter Hangouts. I think on probably this next one, I'm going to have a guest on it. The one this past week, didn't do a guest, but next week's episode, next week's Hunters Hangout, I'm looking to try to get a guest on for it, and we'll make that announcement on Patreon as well. But just join it. It's a way you can hang out with us, ask us, specific questions that maybe you want answered before we get to it on a Q&A. And then also we'll have some other topics we'll talk about as well. But it's been real fun so far getting direct feedback from listeners on, what they're like about some of the episodes and other topics they want to kind of discuss kind of off air and so on, asking specific questions. So it's been real good. But other than that, appreciate everybody watching the podcast. Appreciate everybody listening to the podcast. And we'll catch you back here on next Monday's episode of the Southern Outdoorsman Podcast. And remember, guys, y'all stay Southern.